Are you ready?
So, do you remember how to do this?
Yes. All right. Let's do this. Hi, I'm Beth.
And I'm Stainy.
And you're listening to Mixed Politics. Welcome to episode 15. Stainy, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Moscow Mule because you incepted me last time.
Wait, I what?
You incepted. You never seen the movie Inception?
Of course I have, but it just sounded really weird when you said
I made that up. Incepted. But yeah, and I was like, I got a fucking metal cup and I got the ingredients.
See,
so
you got the official one, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, you were drinking out of something else, right?
No, it was one of those two.
It was one of these? Okay. Yeah, I had them just sitting there and I was like, you know what, I'll use it. What are you drinking?
Well, I'm drinking a margarita, but I don't have any tequila, so I've got vodka in it instead. But hey, it's going to have to suffice.
I don't think there's such a thing as a vodka margarita.
It's a poor man's margarita.
I can just see Mexicans watching this just grimacing like, what did you say? Like,
yeah.
And Russians are like, yes! Ah!
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So, what are we talking about tonight?
We are talking about what's going on with Texas Revisited.
Again.
We did an episode way back, episode 2. We did what's going on with Texas.
Wow,
and so this is a follow-up. So for any of you listening right now, if you have not heard episode 2, take 50 minutes out of your day. Go check in on that. We dove into a lot of the stuff that we're going to touch on today because, you know, in Texas, some things never change.
Some things never change. Like their senator. They just have a hard time voting this motherfucker out. And I don't know why. But
him and Ted Cruz.
That guy. Cancun Cruz. I think that was the name of the episode. Or was that like a separate one?
No. We made reference to Cancun Cruz, Flying Ted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Y'all know how much I dislike Ted Cruz. So any chance to throw him under the bus, I'm here for it.
I see.
Yeah. So we definitely talked about a lot of the stuff that happened in February. There was this major blackout situation, cold temperatures in Texas, which is really sort of unusual, but not really unusual. We'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
So episode 2, we talked about what happened when Ted Cruz fled his state, blamed his children for it. Well, somewhere around 700 people.
Hero.
Yeah. Somewhere around 700 people died in the cold because they froze to death. And at the time, Governor Abbott and some other so-called leaders in Texas blamed windmills for the problem. So there was an energy shortage and a lot of so the cold temperatures really kicked off this huge debate about how Texas does their energy to begin with. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the conservatives liked to demonize the windmills because they just don't really understand the whole renewable energy thing. They love their oil.
Not true. That's not true. They're especially especially the Republican congressmen, senators, whatever. They get all the briefs. They have all the information. The EPA briefs them. The energy department briefs them, the whatever. Like, don't think they don't know. We've been over this many, many times. It's not that they don't know. They know that the people listening don't know. And so they pretend to not know. Like, if you were to quiz one of them, they'd give you all the right answers.
Wait, honestly. I didn't say they didn't know about it. I said they don't like it. They don't like it. Yeah, they don't like it. You're right. They do know. They know about renewable energy. They know that there's benefit to it. They know it's less costly. It's also better for the environment. It's something that we should be looking at long term because oil's not always going to be there. But yeah, they know. But
they don't care. They don't care. They don't care because there's a lot of money in not caring.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So
you know what the weird thing is though? Isn't there like a lot of money in caring? Isn't there a lot of money to be made in renewable energy? Like if you had like massive wind farms lobbying them or, wind farm companies or whatever renewable energy source company is lobbying them, just like the oil companies lobby them. Like why
Mhm.
not get that money?
Because right now oil lobbyists are paying more, and
Okay.
that's really what it is. It boils down to the Benjamins. That's really what it is. So
The whole Franklin.
back then we were hearing at first it was the windmills that were the problem. Now those of us with any common sense knew that wasn't the case, but after an investigation, shocker, it was natural gas lines that were the problem. There was some freezing. So it was a combination of planned
Yeah.
rolling blackouts that they've done. This is done for load balancing. So if you've ever seen a washing machine that's off balance, if everything's off to one side, you know that there's problems, it'll break down. Load balancing is something that happens not just with washing machines. It happens in production lines, in multiple different things that we use on a daily basis. Oil
Yeah.
is one of them. Oil
In
and natural
NBA
gas, they
games.
have to, and NBA games.
No,
So
for
they
real.
were,
They call it load management.
well,
Same.
yeah, same concept, exactly. So load
Yeah.
balancing is something that they have to do. This is all the way back to the 80s or 90s. Texas was doing this load balancing. So they would do planned blackouts for energy sources that were not needed at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
the combination of the planned rollouts plus the high demand for energy during the cold temperatures led to blackouts, and this was such chaos because it was something that was predictable, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later. It was very predictable,
Yeah.
and it really boiled down to a lack of proper weatherization because for
Mm-hmm.
some reason people in Texas think it never gets cold. And shocker, they also believe in not having regulation. Texas does not believe that the government should be regulating energy or lots of other things. So, because it was not properly weatherized, things froze and blackouts happened and people froze to death. That's how we
Not
got to
not
where we
not
are.
not only do they not like regulation, they like privatization, and it's
Yes.
just like they push for everything to be private and like, and private sector money making, and it's like, just so you know, the private sector don't really care about you; they care about profits. And
This
I
is
don't
so
understand how
true.
to explain this any better to Texas people who keep voting for the people who line their pockets with lobby money from people who don't want regulations. It's just
Well,
weird to me. It's like you have fat friends and family and cousins and whatever that just died in 2 inches of snow. The rest
yes.
of the United States is like 2 inches of snow. We can't even sled in that. And we can't do nothing. And y'all dying, but you don't want to do anything about it. Well, all right
Yeah,
then.
and not to make light of the fact that people are dying, but it really is when you think about it. It's tragic that they died with
Mm-hmm.
2 inches of snow. It's insane to me. But
Yeah.
so the reality is that Texas politicians are really, really good at. I'm going to use a term from Ricky Ricardo in I Love Lucy. They're really good at making people look at things through a sweater. That's his way of saying pulling the wool over your eyes.
I love him. Oh man, Ricky,
Yeah.
is it Desi Arnaz? That was his real name,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Desi
Oh
Arnaz.
man,
He was the greatest.
those were good times.
Yes. So they're really good at convincing a lot of people that deregulation is optimal. So much so that
Hmm.
when hundreds of people die, that they think that that's just the price of admission of owning the libs.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's
for the
priority. Own
yes,
the libs over
owning the
everything.
libs is priority. Exactly. So I guess life is an opportunity cost to them. It's supposed to be about liberty from government oversight, but how free are
Hmm.
you if you're not alive anymore? That's my question. And
That's a very
especially
good
when
question.
you're dead from stubbornness. This is really just stubbornness. So people are dying.
Yeah.
Politicians would rather spin the story than to admit that they're not wanting to be accountable for the safety
Right.
of people. Regulation is about safety. And
So
yes, regulation can become extreme. Overregulation is a problem, but the purpose of regulation is safety.
yeah. So this investigation that's like proving everything that we thought, that it wasn't windmills, that it was because you guys didn't want to winterize, because you didn't want to spend money, because whatever. Who did this investigation? Who was in charge of it? Because
Which
from
one?
my
There's,
research, there were multiple investigations,
I
but
was
I'm
just going
I'm
to say
asking
that.
about the one you were
I,
referencing.
I cannot, if I answer that, it's going to reveal
Mm.
the secret, the surprise. I can't answer
No,
that
there's a
question.
surprise. Okay, all right.
Don't spoil the
I guess I'll
surprise.
be surprised too. I don't know. All right.
Yes, so
So
there
the
were
issue this
multiple
time,
investigations.
yeah, the issue this time though is, I mean, we're no longer in winter. So the issue this time is not winterization and people dying from freezing. It is the complete opposite.
Yes,
It is heat. And
that's,
Texas gets
yes.
hella hot.
That's why I
Uh,
mentioned it was weatherization instead of winterization, because it's
oh,
all
okay.
weather. Yes, the
Yeah.
regulation in other states, or let's say places like Sweden, Greenland, where they have the same type of setup. They have windmills.
Yeah.
They don't freeze in the winter. They don't stop
Mm.
working in the summers because they're weatherized. But the thing with
So what is
deregulation is Texas believes that they're just on an island. It's kind of funny, but they just believe they're by themselves. And if you don't have regulators to come in to give you a second pair of eyes to be like, hey,
mhm.
did you think about what happens when it gets to be 110 degrees? Because it's going to happen. No, Texas is just like, fuck that. We don't need you here. Get away from me, government people, blah, blah, blah.
That's how
So,
Texas people sound?
no, that's how the Texas politicians sound, not the people, the politicians.
Okay. Okay. All right. So what is happening in Texas this time now that it's not a snow issue? What's going on with
The funny thing is, politicians, conservative politicians,
mhm.
irony alert, they're
Yeah.
asking people to conserve. I just think it's really
Jesus
ironic.
Christ.
Conservatives,
Oh my
they don't really
God.
conserve on a regular basis, so they're having people, uh, I guess, turn their thermostats up to 78 degrees because there's a high
Mhm.
demand for people want to crank up their air conditioning. It's very hot in Texas right now, but because of the increased demand, they're not load balancing properly. So there's an increased demand, which also means an increase in price. Things are chaotic,
Yeah.
but because they were not properly weatherized and because they are not prepared for an increase in demand on the regular, there are shortages
They are
happening right
not.
now.
They are not. And I have some numbers to share with you regarding how ill prepared they are in regards to any crisis, weather related, whether it's winter or intense heat. You know, obviously flooding probably wouldn't be an issue in Texas, but any form of weather crisis, they're just ill prepared, and it's completely on purpose. Like
Yes.
it's not like, oh, we think it can hold up, and then it doesn't, and people are like, oh my God, this is terrible. No, 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 they know well, like they knew last year that if temperatures got to X point, we're fucked. But
Yes.
but unbeknownst to a lot of people, there's a lot of money to be made in a crisis.
Yes.
A
So let me.
lot of a lot of money to be made in a crisis. Matter of fact, let me throw out one of the numbers here. Back when they had the winter freeze the 2 inches death back in Texas, and it was terrible and people were dying. Energy companies made $11 billion profit in Texas while people were dying, while Ted Cruz was on his plane going to Cancun with his kids, while Bun B was pleading for people to be empathetic towards Texans because they don't have jackets, etc., etc. And people were dying. $11 billion in profit was made from that. And you look at this and you ask yourself, how is it that they have a shortage of something and systems were down and not working, but these companies are making profit? Like the regular layman who hasn't researched this or hasn't looked into this or hasn't, cared, would, like, if I pose that question, it would boggle someone who to be like, so how can my company make a profit if I'm not selling the product because the product is down? Here's how Texas fucking works. When there's a crisis and the product is down, the product electricity is down, it creates a scarcity. And if you know anything about supply and demand,
I know. I know. I
when
know.
when there's a scarcity, the price of shit
Scarcity.
goes up.
Scarcity
So
creates
people,
value.
yeah, so people got electric bills for like $29,000
Oh
for
yeah.
like the month.
Yeah.
So, and they had to pay it because they use the electricity. The meter outside said you use this much or this many gigawatts or a fraction of a gigawatt or whatever or
Yep.
watts for X amount of time. So you have to pay this fee. And
Yep.
just it's unfortunate for you that in this week when shit was going on, the fee went from, I don't know, $10 per watt or whatever to $2,700 per watt. Like what?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So they made there's a number of companies. There's a list I found online of the various companies whose profits went up, and you have about 26 million customers that are on this grid. So if you crunch the numbers, if everything gets, if your phone bill was not phone bill, sorry, your electricity bill was like, I don't know, $120, and then everything went up by 1,200%. That's how all these companies made money, because they weren't supplying the crisis or fixing the crisis. They were just increasing the price. Like, well, you can't get enough electricity, but what we do have, we can sell you for higher. That sounds so ridiculous to me in a first world country, in the richest
Yes.
country, in the best country, in USA. Like, that sounds absolutely ridiculous on every
Well,
level. Like, I can't find a level or an inch in that whole thing where it's just like, well, that sounds like it makes sense. That's
so
just evil.
that's why politicians have to spin this, because they don't want to admit that these energy companies are making money off of this.
Yeah.
There are multiple different sources of energy. We've got oil, we've got natural gas, we've got windmills. They're trying to
Hmm.
demonize the windmills because it's politically expedient for them, because
But
that's part of.
and the windmill is the least of the power production. I think it's like 11% or some shit
I
like
think
that.
it's somewhere around
In
15, 17% or something like that.
Right, so it's like let's demonize the one that's like the least,
Because they
the less provider.
because
This is
they know that their constituents don't understand the nuances of this stuff because they don't take the time to research.
yeah.
But these politicians know better. They know that when this crisis happened in February, this was not the first time it happened. They also know that their constituents on the whole were just worried about getting their lights turned on. They were just worried about getting their heat turned on. So
Yeah.
fast forward to now, when the temperatures are rising like they do every single year in Texas, and
Hmm.
they know that their constituents again are just concerned about getting their energy source. They're not concerned about asking the question of, why is this happening again? Why are these energy companies able to exploit this? Why am I paying more for energy in the summertime? And I'm not talking about just paying more because you're using more.
Yeah.
Paying more by using the same amount, that's the problem. So, yeah, they do know better, but the constituents are just worried about keeping their lights on. They're not going to ask these questions, but that's our job.
All right, and we'll ask them. So currently, the issue in Texas is that ERCOT, which is the overall power handling
Hmm.
service in Texas, is telling people to set their thermostat to 78 or 82 degrees higher. Actually, let me quote it. The energy company ERCOT wrote, "Set your thermostat to 78 or 82 degrees or higher. Every degree of cooling increases your energy use by 68%," the company wrote. End of quote. And I'm
Six
like,
to eight percent.
68, bro. I told you I got some weird numbers. I was like, wait, every degree, like between 72 and 73, that's 8% of your bill. Like you just increased, like if you went from all right, so let's okay, so they're cooling. So they went from 72 to 71. Just by doing that, you've increased your fucking bill by it's 6 to 8 by 8%.
That's insane to me. That's
And they're
insane.
having heat waves.
And
What?
to your earlier point, the energy doesn't really cost 8% more. It's
It
just
doesn't.
the price is 8% more.
Right,
There's a
right.
difference between the actual cost of it, what it should cost,
Yeah.
and what what it costs to actually get it off the production line and get it to the sources versus what it's actually worth.
So I wanna quote something else to you again because there's so many quotables in this. Like we literally could make this podcast just like a collection of memes because it's hilarious. It's hilarious because certain prominent and popular people in Texas don't know when or how to just shut the fuck up when other things are happening. And so it always comes back to bite them in the ass.
I
Namely,
know.
the one that just gets bitten often is your favorite your boyfriend.
My boyfriend, Ted
Ted
Cruz.
Cruz. Ted Cruz. So I want to say, when was it? It was last September. He sent out tweets when was it September? Yeah, I think they were having some kind of heat wave or forest fire situation in California.
In California, yeah.
Right. And he called the California government dysfunctional, and I quote, for not allowing residents to turn on or run their AC during a heat wave. Which is exactly what Texas is doing right now.
Can you see the utter disdain on my face?
This is so good. It's so, like, I'm sorry that this is funny because the people of Texas are suffering. But,
right?
But this asshole, all right, so he continued. Was this last September? Right, he continued. Let me read the tweet for you. It says, some angry lefty actor thinks California is the only place that has summer. It's hot everywhere. Try Texas every summertime. But the rest of the country doesn't have such a dysfunctional state government that you can't turn on the lights or even turn on your AC. That's a policy failure of the Dems. That was last September. Fast forward.
Hold on a second. I just have to say, I sense a little projection happening there, Mr. Cruz.
I know. Fast forward. It's not even been a year. We're not in September. It's not even been a year. And so everyone found the tweets and started sending them back to him like, is this you, cuz? Is this you,
is
idiot?
This you,
like
bro?
you said this. So, and his only response, which for the first time in my life, I'm gonna give him credit. First time in my life, I'm gonna give Ted Cruz credit. His response was, "Are you ready for this?"
Yeah.
I have no defense.
No.
I know, right? That blew my
Wow.
mind. I was like, "You're not gonna spin, and you're not gonna say anything." He's just like, "I fucked up."
Let me. Point
I think he's
out,
learning because he keeps
not
fucking up.
No, see, I'm not going to give him full credit. I give him partial credit. It takes a big person, and he is big, by the way. It takes a big person to say
his head is big,
his body's big, but it takes a big person to say I have no defense. But it takes an even bigger person to say I was wrong.
I was wrong.
He didn't
and
say
a
he
much
was wrong.
bigger person to fix the fucking problem. He's the one who has the ability to fix the problem.
Yes,
but I just thought it was
the only reason I just have
to,
I have to say the only reason I mention his weight, because I'm not into fat shaming. The only reason I mention his weight is because he's literally becoming bigger off of the backs of the people who voted him into office.
Right,
I mean, he's just a fat cat just bleeding money and everything off of his constituents, and the man just looks slovenly. So I had to point out the fact that he's,
smarmy.
Yes.
That's the word.
I just wanted our viewers to know that I'm not fat shaming him. I'm just pointing out that he doesn't take care of himself. So
all right. So besides that irony, there's a whole lot of other irony that is being displayed by the right or conservatives. And it's so funny because I know they don't understand in general, and not all of them, but a lot of them don't understand like literary prose and positions. So like explaining irony to them, they just be like, whatever, who cares? I don't know what that means. So they we know for a fact that they don't get sarcasm, they don't get satire,
right?
They literally don't get memes.
And memes are just sometimes the only thing that makes me smile in a day.
Yeah. But they also apparently don't get irony. Because it's weird that you pointed out that the conservatives are asking people to conserve.
Right. Which tells you that it's not within their nature to conserve. I've said this for years amongst my friends, that they're preservatives. They're not conserving anything. They're preserving the 1950s. They're
Oh, okay.
preservatives, not conservatives. So behind closed doors, I will call them preservatives.
All right. So, um, I'm sorry. People of Texas, please understand that I'm not laughing at you, nor am
No,
I laughing with you because you're not laughing. It's
no,
just sometimes you gotta laugh so you don't cry.
right.
And I think that's where I'm at right now with Texas because it's just like, bro, y'all keep doing this to yourselves. And it keeps happening just back to back to back, just over and over, disaster after disaster. Whether it's, I mean, we just started hurricane season. And we
Mm-hmm.
know what happens to Texas in hurricane season.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we had the cold, now we're dealing with heat, and it's like we still got a ways to go before it
Yes.
gets cold again.
And every time there's a hurricane in Florida,
Yeah.
Texas, any of those southern border states, or along the coast, I hear from my friends that get very upset about how there's
Mhm.
price gouging. Anytime there's a hurricane, generators cost more, food costs more, water costs more.
Yeah.
They say this every time, yet this happens in Texas all the time with their energy. Every time it's cold, every time it's hot, things cost
Every
more,
time there's a hurricane, yeah.
but they still keep voting the same people into office that caused this problem to happen. So I just have to ask at some point, because you're right, we're not trying to poke fun at actual people.
Right.
We're poking fun at the situation, but we do have to ask the people, why do you keep voting for the same people who are causing this problem and not
Why
fixing
don't you
this
tie
problem?
people to the back of pickup trucks and head down? I'm joking. Don't do that.
That does not happen. No.
Oh, it
no.
happens. Not here. It happens.
Not
it happened
in America.
It happened to
right.
a mayor in Texas, in Mexico.
Yes.
Apparently, they sent him to the government to do whatever, and he went there and started chumming up with the lobbyists and whatever. And when he came home, they were just like, "Hey, bro, that ain't what we sent you to do. Hog tie.
Mhm.
Let's go."
Something
We can take a page, but
no.
on
Something less violent, but achieves the outcome of making politicians accountable. That's what we
oh
need.
man, yeah.
I think voting them out of office is probably the only tool we have in our toolbox right now.
That doesn't seem consequential enough, though. That just seems like, hey,
It
go away.
It doesn't, but at least we're not paying these
Like-
people to be assholes anymore.
Hit them back, hit them back. But so in terms of Texas and this heat right now, and just weatherization and being prepared for a crisis, let me throw out another number for you. Like I said, I got some numbers for you to this time.
Okay.
It said here that Texas operates on the grid on a thin margin of reserve capacity, about 16%. That means, so let's say, let me just see if I can make this easy for everybody listening. Let's say the running capacity of the state of Texas is 100 gigawatts. It's not, but let's just use 100 because it's a big round number. They have a reserve of 16% of that. So 16 out of the 116 they have sitting in the reserve that says, if something happens, we got this 16 to cover us, to push out more electricity, to send to people, to whatever, to sort the problem out if anything should happen. The problem is that's apparently 50% of the reserves of almost every other individual state. Every other state runs somewhere between 30 and 35% of reserve capacity, so that if anything happens, we can just plug this in. It's like if the light goes out at your house, you have flashlights. Everybody else has 6 flashlights. Texas has 1.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
The best way I can, yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, as I said before, it's not like an accidental thing. It's not like when the crisis happens, it's like, oh, just go get the flashlight. Go get the flashlights, plural. And then somebody comes back and go, oh shit, I only found 1. Yeah. No. That's not the case in Texas. The case in Texas is we only bought 1.
Yes.
There is only 1.
Yep.
And we designed that when we went to buy them. When we went out to buy flashlights, we made sure we only bought 1. And it goes back to what I was saying before about the money that these people make off the crisis, because Bob Hall, a Republican Texas state senator, said last week that the grid's operating problems have not been fixed. And he said, if I were a business right now, I'm quoting, if I were a business right now, as desirable as Texas is, if I'm dependent on a steady supply of electricity, I'd be very concerned about coming to Texas right now. That's what he said. And and then he followed up with, it's not even hot yet. It's not, because we're not even in August. It's not even hot yet.
Yes, the peak hot season for them is late July, early August. So we're almost
Yeah.
there.
So the issue with Texas is that they run on what is called jackpot incentives. And the problem with that system is that the power producers don't know how many jackpots will come. But it's literally, it's like playing the lottery. It's like what they do with futures with salt on the road. You don't know how much snow is going to fall this winter, but you don't want to buy too much because then you're just going to be sitting on salt and not using it if not enough snow. But if too much snow falls and you didn't buy enough salt, then we're screwed. So what people do with salt futures is they try to buy a little bit less than they think will fall. But you can't do that with electricity. It's not salting roads, because salting roads, you can just stay home if you can't get out. But no electricity, now you're going to die.
Yes.
So the issue, they're saying the problem with the system is that the power producers don't know how many jackpots will come. In the meantime, there's not much incentive for these additional generators to prepare for extreme weather. The issue is that ERCOT is now putting the customers on edge when the outages have spiked compared to like last year and the year before. And now they're telling people, don't make your house too cold, turn it up to 82. Like, who the hell wants to sit in 82? 78?
I know. That's really, really, really
That's hot as fuck.
Very uncomfortable.
What is it in your house?
Ours is always set at 70.
Mine is at 71. And they're telling people, and I live in Ohio. It does not get as hot as Texas. And they're telling people in Tejas to set it to 82. Yes. Man, yes. I see, they're putting out tweets. They're not telling this to people's face. If somebody was out there telling this to people's face, somebody in Texas would have punched somebody a long time ago. 82 in my house? That's
it's
so
insane
crazy.
To me. Now, why is it that these politicians in Texas, or even some of the constituents, are very anti-regulation? But they're really not. They're just anti-regulation when it comes to energy. But look at what happens when they're anti-regulation, because they're all about regulating my body. I can't go to Texas and get an abortion right now because they think that I shouldn't be able to do that. I also can't go to Texas. I can't move there and vote easily because, they're all about regulation when it comes to voting rights in my body. Yeah. But when it comes to energy, but look at what's happening when they don't regulate properly. People aren't allowed to use the commodity that they're paying for because they're still paying for energy that they can't use to their liking. I don't understand this disconnect in their brains that they're advocating for deregulation in energy, but not making the connection that deregulation is what allows them to not have air conditioning in the dead of summer. I don't get it.
In the dead of summer. And so here's the thing. The deregulation helps these private companies. And I know we talked about this before in a previous podcast, in the probably What the Fuck is Going On in Texas podcast. But if you don't have to spend money weatherizing or winterizing or summerizing or whatever, your equipment, then that's money that you save and that goes into your pockets as a CEO or a shareholder or whatever. The issue is, so let me throw out another number. Like, I got so many numbers tonight. So when the bullshit happened in February and people were dying in Texas or whatever, private energy companies as a collective, and I think there's probably like 2 or 3 major big ones in Texas, made a profit in that time. Not like for the year or whatever, for the time that the winter shit was happening, made $11 billion.
You already mentioned that. You mentioned that earlier in the episode. Yeah. But
what I didn't mention is that one of the people who owns one of these companies, immediately after those profits were calculated, were gained, were put in bank accounts, wrote a check for the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, for $1 million. Now, I would like for the people of Texas to listen. If there are any listeners in Texas, please listen to what I just said. After the crisis, which created a scarcity, and the crisis happened because these companies were deregulated and treated you like shit and didn't have any respect for you or the money that you were paying them for utilities, and your family members started to die, and Ted Cruz ran off to Cancun. When all of that happened, they made $11 billion, and a person who profited monetarily from this wrote the governor a check for $1 million. This is not something I'm making up. Like, I can actually post the articles right here, or you can Google it. His name is Kelsey Warren. Kelsey Warren wrote a check on, I want to say, actually it's June 3rd, recently.
How was he able to donate that much with campaign finance laws the way that they
then
are?
I'll read it to you. So it says here, in June, Warren cut a check to Abbott's campaign for $1 million, according to the governor's latest campaign finance filings, which covers January through June. That's 4 times more than the $250,000 checks that the billionaire has given to Abbott in prior years, and the most he's ever given to a state politician in Texas. I don't know if state politics is regulated in terms of finance, is regulated the way federal is. You know, Texas is filled with whatever kind of fucking loopholes. And this is a guess I'm making. It's not something that I know, so please don't hold me to it. But I'm guessing that the same rules that govern campaign finance federally is not what governs Texas campaign finance. Because he literally just gave 4 times what he usually gave after people died. It's disgusting.
It is disgusting.
It's disgusting as fuck. The House Climate, Environment, and Energy Caucus. And it's headed up by Democrats, which is weird, but okay. One of the members from that caucus, Representative Erin Zweiner, she chairs the caucus. She said, when Governor Abbott said that we did everything we needed to do to fix the grid, what he meant was we did everything we needed to do that doesn't interfere with my cronies' profit margins. And not only did it not interfere, it increased their profits, and then he got like a kickback. Like literally, $1 million is a kickback.
Yeah, that is a kickback.
Because the $1 million contribution is one of 4 of million. So it's only one. Warren's $1 million contribution was one of 4 individual $1 million contribution that he received from donors in June. So, and his campaign hauled in $20 million in that month, and $4 million out of that came directly from the CEOs of energy companies in Texas. So if you're listening to this and you're not pissed off about this, then nothing pisses you off. Right. You're just the coolest fucking cat this side of the cosmos.
But so speaking of investigations, I do want to read an executive summary. This is from the FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and the NAERC, which is the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. Before I begin, ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. Okay. Be sure to keep all hands and feet inside the vehicle at all times and enjoy your ride. Okay.
We're at Cedar Point. Let's do this.
Okay, so I'm going to read a couple excerpts from this, and I am just skimming. But the first time that ERCOT resorted to system-wide rolling blackouts to prevent more widespread customer outages was after 1989. That was the worst winter storm that they could remember on record. The Arctic cold front that descended on the Southwest during the first week of February was unusually severe in terms of temperature, wind, and duration of the event. So, rolling blackouts affected the largest number of customers, 3.2 million. A total of 193 ERCOT generating units failed or were derated, representing a cumulative loss of 29,729 megawatts. So combining the forced outages, as I mentioned earlier, with scheduled outages, approximately a third of the total ERCOT fleet was unavailable at the lowest point of the winter event. And so the extensive generator failures overwhelmed ERCOT's reserves, which eventually dropped below the level of safe operation. And that goes back to your prior point about the reserves that they have.
Yeah.
So very high prices are expected as a response to scarcity conditions, but this is supposed to be built into ERCOT's energy-only market. Unfortunately, it was higher than expected. Nearly half of its black start units were either on scheduled outage at the time of the event or failed during the event itself, jeopardizing the utility's ability to promptly restore the system, and an ERCOT-wide blackout occurred. They say ERCOT-wide as opposed to some of the other regions that are around Texas.
Yeah.
Majority of problems experienced by the many generators that tripped, suffered derates, or failed to start during the event were attributable either directly or indirectly to the cold weather itself. Weather-related causes including frozen sensing lines, frozen equipment, frozen water lines, frozen valves, blade icing, low temperature cutoff limits, and the like. The production losses stemmed principally from three things: freeze-offs, icy roads, and rolling electric blackouts. Freeze-offs occurred when the small amount of water produced alongside the natural gas crystallized or froze. So it wasn't the wind turbines, it wasn't that, it was natural gas. Freeze-offs routinely recur in very cold weather, but this happens every winter.
Mm-hmm.
Icy roads prevented maintenance personnel and the equipment from reaching the wells and hauling off produced water, which, if left in the holding tanks at the wellhead, causes the wells to shut down automatically, which also caused the blackouts.
Wow.
For winterization specifically, generators and natural gas producers suffered severe losses of capacity despite having received accurate forecasts of the storm. Entities in both categories report having winterization procedures in place. However, the poor performance of many of these generating units and wells suggests that these procedures were either inadequate or were not adequately followed. While extreme cold weather events are obviously not as common in the Southwest as elsewhere, they do occur there every few years. And when they do, the cost in terms of dollars and human hardship is considerable. In many cases, the needed fixes would not be unduly expensive. They just need to invest it. Any resolution of the many issues arising from electric and natural gas interdependency must be informed by an examination of more than one cold weather event in one part of the country. Basically, calling out Texas and saying, you guys are not an island all upon yourselves. You actually have to take part in this society and
Their
listen to,
response
what the other states do. For that reason, this report does not offer specific recommendations in this area, but urges regulatory and industry bodies to explore solutions to the many interdependency problems which are likely to remain of concern in the future.
In the future, I was just about to say indefinitely.
The report that I just read to you.
I knew you were going to say that.
What?
I when you were saying in the future, I was just about to say indefinitely because that's the way I see it going. It's not going to be addressed.
This report that I just read to you was from 2011. This was the last time there was a major outage in Texas because of a winter storm.
Wait, so you mean to tell me we can just fucking duplicate that same report for this year and just run it?
You betcha.
Oh,
that was my surprise, was that I pulled the report. It just so happened this report was from 10 fucking years ago. And they specifically said, this is going to happen again. And here we are. It's happened twice. It's happening twice in 1 year. Dude, 10 years later.
What's the saying? The people who forget their history are doomed to repeat it. And Texas is doomed to just enjoy repeating it. Like, I don't know what the fuck. That's crazy.
So our listeners in Texas, you guys have the ability to change this. This report does not have to be duplicated this year. It does not have to be duplicated 10 years from now. Get better fucking politicians in Texas, people that will get these energy companies under control, because it's not acceptable.
So here's what I found when I was looking up similar information to you. It says that since February, though, since that whole winter storm problem and now that they're facing a heat problem, the state passed some reforms to address the problem. It's just that it's not even band-aids. Okay, so the best analogy that I could give you, Beth, is that you got a cut right here on your arm. That's the problem that we're having with Texas, the non-winterization, the non-regulation, whatever, and it creates this cut. Now, please don't think that I'm minimizing people's death to a cut on your arm, but let's say it's a cut on your arm, and Texas apparently ran some reforms, and they got some Band-Aid and they put it over here, where there's not a cut, and I don't know. Like when I was reading it, like I had to read it like 2 or 3 times because I'm thinking to myself, am I reading wrong? Am I dyslexic? I don't understand. Why are you not fixing the problem. But addressing other things that aren't even an issue? Here's the biggest issue. So they said they passed some reforms in February. However, ERCOT still relies on lopsided incentives triggered, please listen carefully, triggered only during a crisis to get the generators to produce more electricity.
What?
Which means it's because they're trying to maximize on profits. It is only when there's a crisis that the generators are triggered. Like let's make more energy to save these people. In all the other states, they just maintain a 30 to 35% every single time, every single day. Somebody goes out and checks like how much reserves do we have? Okay, we're good, and then they go back. Texas is just like on the barest minimum, but if there's a crisis, we'll turn them on real quick. And
well, define crisis. I mean, how do they define that?
I don't know. But what it says here is that, you know, obviously the 16% is less than half of what other people, other states hold in their reserves. But this is what happens. So let me see if I can try to explain the best I can. I'll just read it to you. So ERCOT says in their briefing that an extreme weather scenario with a peak demand, low output from solar and wind farms, and a spike in generator outages would leave the grid with a capacity shortfall of about 15,000 megawatts. Now, that's a shortfall because they need about 11 to run. When they have a crisis and they're depending on like outside sources to generate power to help, there's a research note from the McCullough Research Institute says that power suppliers in Texas can receive, listen to these numbers, up to $9,000 per megawatt during a time of crisis. But those incentives can produce perverse outcomes. For example, a South Texas nuclear power plant lost one of its 2 reactors after a 5-foot section. 5-foot section. That's
as
much.
Tall as me. I'm 5 feet tall.
A 5-foot section in an uninsulated pipe seized up in February. The loss contributed to a shortage in power, but in an ironic twist, the nuclear plant earned $9 million per hour because of the scarcity pricing skyrocketing. Now, here's the thing. If the emergency had been averted, the plant would only have been paid the normal rate of about $60,000 an hour. What this means is that it may not be optimal to maintain a weatherized system and weatherized equipment. Because if a minor problem that is 5 feet in length, you literally go out there, cut off 5 pieces of pipes and I guess replace it. If a minor problem like that can generate
millions of dollars,
$9 million, be honest with yourself, viewers and listeners. Would you fucking fix it? If you fix it, you get 60,000. If you don't fix it, you get 9 million.
Right.
That's like that's an ethical crisis. That's really what it is.
To put it in the simplest of terms, there is no incentive to fix the problems. There's
None.
only an incentive to make the problems happen and to perpetuate them.
Exactly. So the person from the Institute who wrote up the report says there's nothing we can really do about it as long as the system stays in place, where the scarcity causes the profits in pricing to skyrocket. Not the output to skyrocket, not the power generation to skyrocket, not the reserves to be used, but just the pricing skyrocketing. He says we're playing with the hand we're dealt, and it's going to be a tight summer, no doubt. That was my man's quote. He said it's going to be a tight summer. It's going to be tight.
It's a basic economic principle that scarcity creates value. So this is where the battle between privatization and government regulation is always going to, it's going to come down to what are your ethics and what are your morals. Are you talking
Yeah.
about allowing people to be able to use energy at any point? Then privatization is not the way to go, because the incentive is for them to make profit, and they will make profit by doing this kind of stuff that you're just talking about.
Yeah.
They are only incentivized financially to have a crisis. So government regulation is the only thing that protects people, because the government would say, I don't care what the profit is. I don't care what creates the value. We're talking
Yeah.
about humanity, and we protect the humans. So you put a price cap on it in the time of crisis to say, sure, this person is using more energy during the winter storm, but don't charge them $27,000 per unit. The cap is at $200 or something like that.
Right there. See, when you're capping profits, though, you run into those C words and S words, socialism and communism, because the
See?
free market should dictate that if you're willing to pay for it, then I'm willing to sell it to you.
Oh, but here's the thing. This is where I take issue. Yes, I'm rolling my eyes too. But here's what people don't understand about that. If you say if the person's willing to pay for it, then they're going to pay for it. But that's talking about at the point of sale. I have the choice as a consumer to decide if I'm going to pay for that. No, these people are using the energy and getting billed later for it. They didn't have a free will to. Nobody approached them and said, if you keep using your electricity, you're going to get charged $27,000. I guarantee you that person would say, "Fuck you, turn off my energy
Turn
right
it
now."
off. Fucking turn it off.
They don't get the choice. The market's not in play here, because the consumer
Yeah.
is not engaging directly in the market. The market is between
sense.
the energy company and the politicians.
And
And that's it. Yes, it's not, the consumer is not engaged in that market. It's like
So
taking your car to get your tires changed, and they say, "Okay, we'll change them for you." And then after they change your tires, they say, "Oh, by the way, we decided to change your air filter. We put all new tires on there, and you have to pay us for it." That's the equivalent of what's happening in the energy market in Texas.
Only in that analogy, you can be like, "Fuck you," and drive off your car with your new air filter. You can't do that with electricity.
Exactly.
It's
So we're
over
talking
for
about
you.
socialism and communism. Okay, most people who throw around those terms don't know what they mean. I've studied comparative economic systems. I know what socialism is, and it's not as scary as people like to make it sound. Plus, we're talking about socialism as an economic system, and also
Yeah.
socialism as a political system. There's a difference between the two things. Socialism as an economic system is not a boogeyman. There are some benefits to it in times like this, when you have
In
an
times
energy
of crisis.
Yes, that's when the government says, we're protecting you, we're putting a price cap on this. So
And that's
no
exactly
matter
what the
happens-
government did in February. Like, the federal
Yes.
government sent help to Texas.
Yes.
But I don't know. You know what the funny thing is, though? This is not. I don't think this is an American phenomenon of profiting off crisis and death.
No.
I think it's like just an oligarchic system to profit off crisis and death. And I can give you a list of various other crises and disasters where people who are already rich. All right, for example, the fucking pandemic. Jeff Bezos went from 64 billion to 220 billion in 1 year in a pandemic, and it's like, hey, bro. And you know what? Somebody, I don't remember who it was. There was a podcast I was listening to, and somebody was saying that if they had privatized the vaccines and, like, made it a profit thing, that we would literally have Amazon Prime vans driving up to our house with vaccines. Like, hey guys, come get this.
Totally.
Because that's how they work. When Katrina happened and, like, all of New Orleans was flooded out and shit, and a lot of those houses were condemned, people who had money, developers, went in and bought up all of these houses for cheap, and then flipped them and whatever, and made a fucking profit. When the disaster happened, the hurricane happened in Puerto Rico, not this recent one, the one before, years before. Developers went down there and were just like, listen, we're going to loan you money to help build back and whatever, but we're buying all of this property, all of this land, all of these golf courses, all of these hotels or whatever for cheap. And then they flip it and make a fucking profit. It's something that I've started to do when I'm like watching crises on the news and like it's like a hurricane or a flood or whatever, my first thought is, who the fuck is going to profit from this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's bad because it's like, but that's become the norm now. It's like people are dying, somebody's making money. Who the fuck is making money?
Absolutely. Somebody's always going to be exploiting the opportunity. And what's strange to me is that these people who really still at this day and age like Donald Trump loved that about him. He made his entire career in real estate exploiting the underdog and exploiting people, their labor, their time, their energy, their money. Yes, he exploited everybody. And people thought he was a genius for it. And so they can't really hold their nose in disgust now to say that they're surprised that people would profit off of a crisis.
Evil isn't genius. It's profitable, but it ain't genius. It's just evil.
It's just evil, exactly. So they either have to look back at Trump and say, okay, maybe he's not a genius, or they have to not be surprised by the people who are profiting off of what's going on in Texas right now.
Yeah.
It's all, this is how people get rich.
It's sad. And we're not getting rich off it. But, Beth, please tell these people how they can get in contact with us. It was a wonderful time being back here doing this. And
yes,
let's keep going.
Yes. All right. So we are on Twitch at Mixed Politics. We're also on YouTube if you search Mixed Politics. And by the way, we're trying to reserve an actual domain there. So to make it easy and searchable for us, we're working on it. Facebook,
so press the subscribe button.
Yes, subscribe to us. That helps us get there. So Facebook and Instagram, we're at mixed.politics. On Twitter, at mixedpolitics1. And email, you can send us an email with your thoughts, your questions, or just some random, I don't know, SpongeBob episodes that you like at mixedpoliticspod@gmail.com. We are also on Patreon, and that is Stainy's wheelhouse. So I'm going to let him explain that to you.
All right. So Patreon, www.patreon.com/mixedpolitics. There's bonus footage. There's merch. We got a new Patreon supporter in the past couple of weeks. Her name is Sierra.
Hi, Sierra. Thank you.
She jumped up a number of tiers. I'm not going to put her financial business out there, but thank you. You paid the bill for the whole month. Woo! Jesus. I know.
That's awesome.
So I reached out to her and I told her, to send us the question that she wanted to ask and, size and so forth for whatever merch, that she needs to be sent to her. And her response was, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to support your podcast. And I was
oh, wow.
Ooh.
That's
but I
amazing.
still want to send it. So I think I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna find out and send it to her. She gotta get her just due. But you too can, do all those things and be a part of all of these things. And if you surf on over to patreon.com/mixedpolitics, you can be a part of the show. You can help make the show. You can help pay for the show. And we kick back. Just like rich people kick back to Governor Abbott in Texas for fucking them over. We're not fucking you over. We're giving you a really good product and sending you shit.
Yes.
So there's that. And we got to sign off. So.
Yes. Well, this was fun, Stainy. I'm glad we're back at it. So we're going to be on a roll. We're not going to have such a long break this time, guys. And maybe, I don't know, should we explain why we've been on hiatus for a little bit?
No, but there's a lot of new stuff coming, and you probably won't. We're gonna have to figure out a way to not do split screen because we've been so comfortable with the split screen, and now we're gonna be sitting across from each other. So that's the only thing I can say about that.
Yes, that's what's in the works. We're trying to get into one place together.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Me
to our analysts, pundits, and experts, our apes, thank you for staying with us, and cheers.
Cheers.
Have a good one. What is that? Episode 15 in the bag?
Yes.
That's awesome. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but I got banned from Instagram.